Our whole global economy is basically built on one idea: growth. But that very engine of our prosperity, well, it's on a collision course with the survival of our planet. So, how on earth do we choose between them?
And that's the really tough question, isn't it? The quickest, most straightforward way to slash carbon emissions is to just stop. Stop building so much, stop producing so much, stop consuming so much. But what would that actually mean for the millions of jobs that depend on all that activity? What would it do to the economic stability we pretty much take for granted? This tension has dragged a once kind of niche academic concept called degrowth right into the mainstream conversation. The basic idea is, hey, we live on a planet with finite resources, right? So maybe we should be aiming for smaller, slower, more sustainable economies that are focused on well-being, not just endlessly chasing a higher GDP. It's an idea that's gaining some serious traction, even popping up in UN reports.
Okay, so let's really dive into this. To get why this is such a dilemma, we have to look at where all these emissions are actually coming from. And spoiler, it's not from you forgetting to recycle. It's the huge, unglamorous backbone of our modern world.
When you look at the numbers, what's really wild is how concentrated the problem is. You've got heavy industry. We're talking steel, cement. That's a whopping 22% of emissions. The entire construction sector, that's 37%. And these aren't just abstract percentages. They represent the literal building blocks of our civilization. And right now, making that stuff requires a tremendous amount of energy. Then you throw agriculture into the mix and you see the problem. The very things we need to build our world and feed ourselves are driving the crisis. And this is where it gets really personal. We're not just talking about factories on a map. We're talking about some of the biggest employers on the entire planet. So shrinking them isn't some neat little policy tweak. It means cutting jobs. It means freezing wages. It means kicking away the ladder that millions of people are trying to climb to escape poverty.
And this really puts the whole challenge into perspective. There are 700 million people still living in extreme poverty. For them, a word like degrowth isn't some interesting intellectual concept. No, it sounds a lot like a door to a better life slamming shut. But wait, you might be thinking, surely some places have figured this out, right? I mean, take Europe. On the surface, it looks like this massive climate success story. But the numbers don't always tell the whole story. On paper, this looks absolutely incredible. Europe has managed to cut its emissions by about 37% since 1990, all while its economy nearly tripled in size. It really seems like the perfect example of decoupling growth from carbon emissions, the holy grail. But here's the catch. Europe didn't magically stop using steel and cement. It just stopped making as much of it at home. The factories and all their emissions simply got moved abroad, often to countries like Turkey, India, and China, where environmental standards can be a lot lower. So the carbon footprint didn't really shrink, it was just outsourced. It's like a global shell game with pollution.
So this whole dilemma has forced countries to try and find their own way forward, and it's led to some really fascinating case studies. Let's look at two of them, Japan and Costa Rica, because they showed just how differently you can approach building a low-carbon society. So on one side, you've got Japan. It's become a model of industrial efficiency, but at the same time, it's been wrestling with economic stagnation for decades. And then on the other side, you've got Costa Rica, a much smaller nation that has basically turned environmental restoration into its economic engine. Two very different stories. I mean, if you look at Japan today, it almost looks like the kind of low-carbon society many countries are trying to become. It's got low per capita emissions and this incredibly energy-efficient industrial base. But, and it's a big but, this environmental success has happened alongside 3 straight decades of weak economic growth, wages that have been flat since the 90s, and all the pressures of a rapidly aging population. It just goes to show that being green doesn't automatically mean your economy is going to be dynamic. And then there's Costa Rica, which shows us a totally different path. It basically built its entire national brand around sustainability. They reversed deforestation, they're running almost entirely on renewables, and they use that stable green foundation to attract modern industries like tech. It's a really inspiring model, for sure, but it's not a universal blueprint. Costa Rica has some unique advantages that you just can't copy-paste onto a bigger, more industrialized country. So all of this brings us to the ultimate question, right? How can the world get cleaner without getting poorer? Well, the answer that's starting to emerge is this idea of a just transition, a path forward that's fast enough for the climate, but also fair enough for people. And at the absolute heart of this idea is a moral argument. It says that if the global system is demanding that we decarbonize at lightning speed, then that same system has to help pay for it.
We just can't expect the countries that contributed the least to this problem to sacrifice their one chance at development in order to solve it for everyone else.
So what does that actually look like in practice? Well, experts point to three really key things. First, large-scale retraining programs, creating real, tangible career paths for workers moving from old industries to new ones. Second, targeted investment. So you're not just building one solar farm, you're creating entire clean energy ecosystems in the places that need jobs the most. And third, genuine global support. And that means providing the money and the technology so that developing nations don't have to choose between growth and survival. And here's the really good news. This isn't just some theory. This economic shift is already underway. In 2024, global investment in clean energy hit $2.1 trillion. That's nearly double what went into fossil fuels. Clean energy is one of the fastest growing industries on Earth, creating jobs and whole new supply chains. The growth is definitely there. Which brings us right back to our final question. The challenge isn't just about cutting emissions anymore. It's about doing it without breaking our economies or leaving entire communities behind. It's about building a transition that is not just fast, but also just, one that's productive and innovative. So, can we do it? Can we build a future that is green, fair, and prosperous? Well, that remains the defining test of our time.